What the f*** just happened?
Mr. Reagan.
I'm staying at the Trump Hotel in Chicago, and I must say it is magnificent. If you're ever in Chicago, I highly recommend it. So it occurs to me that the Dems may have cheated. They may have cheated in a variety of ways in many locations around the country. Now, this is not an evidence-based, fact-filled assessment. This is merely the sense that I get reading everything that's going on. And I'm sure YouTube will still censor this video, but yeah, I thought I would put that in there anyway. Now, the night before last, we saw terrible reporting from Fox News. They were absurd with their projections, predicting just about everything going to Biden. Well, you'll be pleased to know that I have discovered the reason for all the bizarrely pro-Biden speculation. The guy that Fox News hired to calculate all the votes and make all those projections was Arnon Mishkin, a Democrat strategist. Now, this is Fox, a news network with like 90% Republican viewers, and they hired a Democrat strategist to make their electoral projections. You know what? Fox were also mostly Christians. Why don't you just hire Satan? So that's why you might have been thinking the other night, I'm never watching Fox ever again. I mean, what was Fox thinking? They lost a lot of credibility by hiring that guy. Big mistake. Now, a lot of people are criticizing the mainstream media and the polls for predicting a Biden landslide. Really? Really? That's your criticism? Of course there was never going to be a Biden landslide. Did you see the Trump rallies? Millions of lawn signs, the boat parades, the car caravans? Of course there was never going to be a Biden landslide. Criticizing for that is like criticizing somebody for saying that you don't have to have air to breathe or something like that. But look, here's the real deal. Here's what everybody's thinking, I think, right now. It's very difficult for Trump supporters to reconcile the enthusiasm that we saw throughout the country before the election and the idea that Democrats might actually beat Donald Trump. On the face of it, it just doesn't make any sense. I have a friend, a beautiful girl. Her name is Grace Saldana. She flew from Florida, where she's just moved, back to California just to vote for Donald Trump. This is passion, folks. This is true patriotism. Do you know anybody who flew across the country just to vote for Joe Biden? No, of course you didn't. Nobody would do that. And yet consider this, according to the numbers being reported, this is real, Joe Biden got the most votes of any candidate in American history. And look, we know that Joe Biden wasn't that popular. There was almost zero enthusiasm for him. So any vote for Joe Biden was actually a vote against Donald Trump. So what we're expected to believe here is that the media was able to convince American voters to hate Donald Trump so much that Joe Biden got more votes than any candidate in American history. I find that a bit hard to believe. And consider also that Republicans gained seats in the House and we held the Senate. So how did we get more votes in most of the other national races and we still lose the presidential election? It seems a bit unlikely. All right, well, let's get the so-called legitimate reasons out of the way first. The media protected Biden. As we all know, all the Biden corruption stuff, the Hunter Biden stuff, all that, it all went unreported by the news media, and it was even hidden by social media. I asked one of my Uber drivers this week, a guy who said he didn't like Trump. I asked him if he'd ever heard of the Hunter Biden laptop or about Joe Biden's corruption. He said that the only time he had heard about that stuff was when Donald Trump brought it up during the debate. And the same thing is true for millions of Americans. They've just never heard anything about the single biggest scandal of any presidential candidate ever. Another so-called legitimate factor was the increase in turnout because of mail-in ballots. Now, mail-in voting did certainly increase Democrat turnout by quite a lot. Mail-in voting makes it extremely easy to vote. And it shouldn't be that easy to vote. Why should it be easy? So morons can do it? Now, there's this idiotic idea in America that the more people who vote, the better. But that is absurd. Why is that a thing? You need to be heard. It's your patriotic duty. Everybody's opinions should be shared and expressed through their vote. But you know what? Most people don't have any idea how a president might help them. They have no idea what the positions are. They don't have any idea what the issues are. They're probably voting against their interest most of the time, and they don't know it. You know why? Because most people are too lazy to educate themselves about politics. So at the end of the day, I don't want a bunch of people who have no idea what they're doing voting for a president that could potentially impact my future, my children's future, my wife's future, everybody's future, all of your futures. I don't want your futures impacted by morons, okay? You really only want people who take the time to educate themselves about the issues to vote. Easily manipulated idiots should not be voting. Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't have the right to vote. They should, but we shouldn't encourage them. We shouldn't make it so easy that, you're basically, in bed going, I guess I'll vote for that guy, I guess I'll vote for that guy. Maybe, I'm not saying that you need people to, climb a mountain to prove they're worthy of voting, but maybe if they have enough passion to just get out of bed, put some clothes on, comb their hair, and get themselves to a polling place, maybe that's enough of an effort to say, okay, this person deserves to vote. But to make it so easy just to mail them their ballots, I think that's terrible, because there's just too many people who don't know what they're doing, too many people who have this cursory view of politics, and the left is just too dang good at manipulating people who really don't know anything about politics. They just manipulate them. They say, the Republicans are the evil ones. They're terrible. People go, okay, I vaguely heard Republicans are evil, so I guess I'll vote for the Democrats, right? Horrible. So at the end of the day, there should be some mild impediment to voting. All right, now this is not voter suppression. The left always says, it's voter suppression. Anything that you do that makes it more difficult to vote is voter suppression, especially black and brown people. They always say, especially black and brown people. But it's not voter suppression. I mean, it is in a way. You can say it's voter suppression. You could say that we don't let children vote. You could say that's voter suppression, right? I mean, anything that mildly inconveniences people could be considered voter suppression. But it isn't. It's just, okay, if you can get your butt out of bed and to a polling place, you can vote, all right? I don't think that that's voter suppression. So the mail-in voting did make it a lot easier for a lot of people who don't know what they're doing to vote, and I think that did contribute to Biden's numbers. So Biden did, in all fairness, get a big chunk of the moron vote. In fact, some might say that constitutes his entire constituency. But an even bigger problem with the mail-in ballots is, as you've heard many times, that mail-in ballots, if they go through the post office, the postal service, it breaks the chain of custody. And when your ballot is just out there in the world floating around, this creates ample opportunity for voter fraud. And this is one of the reasons why Democrats have wanted to institute it for so long. They know that there are many unscrupulous Democrats out there who will exploit these opportunities. And so they're keen to give these unscrupulous people this very chance. Now, I've read a lot of articles from the mainstream media that says, there is very little voter fraud ever. I mean, it's very, very, very rare. Well, no, actually, it's very rare that it's caught. That doesn't mean it's very rare that it happens. Now, if the Democrats are so willing to engage in voter fraud and steal elections and all this kind of stuff, the natural question is, how do they live with themselves? And you might answer that question with this. Well, they're bad people and they don't care. But actually, even bad people don't actually think they're bad people. I don't think the leader of the Germans in the 1930s thought of himself as a bad person. He actually thought he was doing a great service, much like Nancy Pelosi. These bad people often want to justify their actions in their own mind somehow. And okay, actually, I'm not really talking about the Nancy Pelosi's. I'm not talking about the Adam Schiffs. I'm not talking about the Chuck Schumers. I mean, those people are actually pure evil. Okay, the people I'm talking about are more like, the poll workers and, regular Democrats who are involved in politics to some extent. These people don't want to believe they're bad people. They want to believe they're doing the right thing, and so they have to justify evil actions. So if they're helping to steal votes, steal the election, they've got to justify it in their minds, right? So what do they think? They think, Democrats generally believe that Donald Trump stole the election in 2020. So they have no problem stealing the election back this year. That's what they think. That's what they think they're doing. They think they're just taking it back, taking back what's rightfully theirs. In the mind of the Democrat, the ends justify the means. They believe what they're doing is good, and so it doesn't matter how many people they cheat to get it done. And look, we know that Democrats have no problem cheating to get what they want. Look at the Russian dossier. Look at impeachment. These were utterly fraudulent. In fact, the term cheating Democrat is completely redundant. It's like wet water or cold ice. And there's already plenty of evidence of voter fraud. Some of these instances are rather insignificant, but some of them are pretty big. During the Russian collusion investigation, Democrats were constantly saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. Well, in this case, it's where there's fire, there's more fire. So let's take a look at the instances of voter fraud that are currently suspected. One curious aspect of the vote in Wisconsin is that almost 90% of registered voters turned out to vote in the state. 90% of voters in the state turned out to vote. Now, the typical turnout in Wisconsin is between 60 and 70%. So 90% would be almost 20% higher than their best previous years. That's what you might call a red flag. I mean, I'm sorry, this is just not possible. In Australia, where voting is legally mandated, they still only see about a 90% voter turnout year after year. This clearly indicates some kind of voter fraud. And if it's true, if that's true, then it's possible that something like 20% of the votes in Wisconsin might be fraudulent. That's insanity. And how many of those fraudulent votes do you think were for Donald Trump? My guess, 0. I mean, could you imagine what that would mean in terms of Trump victory? That is a blowout, folks. Trump would have won Wisconsin like massively. Now, a much more sinister looking situation are the vote dumps that are 100% for Democrats. In Pennsylvania, one vote dump gave 23,277 votes to Joe Biden and 0 to Donald Trump. And okay, that is just not possible. Maybe with an area of like 30 people I could accept that, but 23,000? Not possible. On Twitter, Democrats are saying, well, that's the mail-in votes, and Donald Trump told his voters not to do mail-in voting, and so you wouldn't find any mail-in votes from Republicans. Okay, that's insane. Of course you're going to find some mail-in votes from Republicans. Not everybody happens to be at home. I, for one, I had to come to Chicago, right? I'm in Chicago right now. And so I couldn't vote in person. I had to put my ballot in one of those secure voting boxes. And there are thousands of people like me across the country, and you just wouldn't find a group of 23,000 votes without a single Republican vote. It just doesn't make any sense. So this is, again, a massive red flag. That needs to be investigated. And then there was this woman.
I am a victim of voter fraud here in Michigan. I got sent 7 absentee ballots with never applying for one, and I went to vote in person on November 3rd, and after giving them my ID card, I ended up having to fill out an affidavit because I was questioned if I had voted already, and I haven't. Come to find out that somebody did vote in my name. So voter fraud is real. Michigan is a crapshoot, and the polls are rigged.
And this guy.
This dude has a fit about something. And then flips off a ballot and then crumples it up. That's not voter fraud. I don't know what is.
And this guy. And this woman.
So I'm in downtown Detroit at the TCF Center in the heart of Detroit. It was at about 4 a.m. that 3 vehicles arrived, a van, a Chrysler 300, and a Ferrari with 130,000 plus ballots. every single ballot, like literally 100% of that 130,000 ballots were all Biden ballots that hadn't been delivered to the precinct before the cutoff time for this precinct. You know, that's just a big irregularity, something that points to large-scale voter fraud.
And this guy. And there's also a few Michigan voters who seem slightly suspicious. Donna Bridges, a 119-year-old voter. June Aiken, a 120-year-old voter. And William Bradley, a 118-year-old voter who died in 1984. My buddy Austin Fletcher, better known as Fleckus, he has been doing a great job of collecting these cases. You should check out his Twitter page if you want to see more of those. And there's more. Project Veritas just came out with a video that indicates postal employees are backdating late ballots in order to qualify them to count. In another instance of utter shadiness, Jordan Epperson reported that over 500 mail-in ballots for Donald Trump was found dumped at a Marysville precinct in Michigan. Later, a clerk told county Republican officials that the ballots were simply misplaced. Sure they were misplaced. That sounds totally legit. We all believe that. It also appears that poll watchers in Detroit, Michigan were locked out of the room and their view of the polling area was blocked with cardboard. Nothing suspicious about that at all. Now, who would think that Detroit would be key to choosing the next president? A completely inept local government that went bankrupt is swaying the vote for Biden. And it's not just Detroit. Many of the voting districts that are key to this election, they're turning out to be places that I wouldn't drink the tap water in. And we're expected to entrust the future of our country to the inept politicians running these places. All right, now I want to be balanced about this, so let's dig into a few things that were genuinely suspicious, that went viral on Twitter, but they're things that have turned out to have totally reasonable explanations. Let's start with the Sharpies, the great Sharpie controversy of 2020. Turns out this is not a problem. The machines can actually count these Sharpie votes. This was just a misunderstanding from a few voters, and it kind of spread out of control, and everybody thinks that the machines can't count the Sharpie votes. But we're assured that they can count the Sharpie votes, and all of the ballots with Sharpie markings will be counted. I actually trust this. I think that this is legit. I looked into it in some depth, and I think that it is true, and I don't think we have to worry too much about Sharpie Gate. Now, there's also an image going around illustrating a vote dump that gave 138,000 votes to Joe Biden and 0 votes to Donald Trump, which seemed very suspicious, naturally. Well, it turns out that that was all because of a typo, and it was never part of any official vote tally. Now, I have thoroughly checked into this, and I can assure you that the typo excuse, the typo reason that was given, the reason that was given, it was a typo, right? That story is actually 100% legit. This was never a case of voter fraud. It genuinely was a mistake. It was just a typo. They fixed it. It was never anything that affected the vote. So we don't have to worry actually about that one. And finally, a pair of suspicious-looking vote count graphs have shown what appear to be artificial spikes in Biden votes. Now, these two can be explained. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but the graphs alone are not actually an indication of fraud. I'm not that worried about those two spikes being a hard indication of fraudulence. Now, they may show votes that are fraudulent. I don't know. But I don't think that we can go on the graphs alone to raise our suspicions there. I think we have to look into other indications that maybe there's fraudulent votes. But those two graphs, I think, don't necessarily show anything that is particularly off. You need something else there. You can't just use those graphs. So, the big question, will Trump pull through? I don't know. I don't know. I still believe that Trump would have won if there had not been so much mail-in voting. And I also think that Trump would have won if there had been zero shenanigans. But with the mail-in ballots, and with the shenanigans, and with the news media and the social media covering up Joe Biden's corruption scandal, and relentlessly and unfairly attacking Donald Trump every day of his presidency, it is definitely possible that Biden will become the next president. But then again, Donald Trump is a fighter. Don't count him out just yet. And remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant, it's just that they're absolutely corrupt. Good night.
The destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn we're spirits, not animals. There's something going on in time and space and beyond time and space, which, whether we like it or not, spells duty.